In 1798, 11 years into the infant nation's life, the United States stood in grave danger. President John Adams faced a looming war with France, and the unanimous support given his predecessor, George Washington, was a thing of the past. Now nearly half of the country publicly despised and maligned Adams. Among members of his Federalist Party, there were worries of possible riots and insurrections akin to the French Revolution, and his wife, Abigail, feared for his physical safety. Under such immediate concerns, it is no surprise that he gave in to temptation. A mere 7 years after the ratification of the Bill of Rights, President John Adams signed the Alien and Sedition Acts into law. The acts prohibited any, quote, false, scandalous, or malicious writing against the government, or anything that would bring the government into contempt or disrepute, close quote. 16 indictments against newspapers followed. Several journalists were tried and jailed, and many more self-censored so as not to be met with fines and arrests. In response, James Madison, author of the First Amendment, boldly stated, quote, that right of free communication among the people has ever been justly deemed the only effectual guardian of every other right, close quote. How easy it is to give in to the temptation to abridge free expression, for, quote, what we obtain too cheaply, we esteem too lightly. But what of free speech that we disagree with or even know to be false? In Weimar Germany, just a few years prior to the rise of the Nazi Party, the government cracked down on radio. This was an attempt on the part of leaders to depoliticize the radio, stabilize the republic, and defend democracy. Yet it was a primary factor in the path to tyranny, for as soon as the Nazis came to power, they had complete censorial control over the flow of information within their borders. In the name of truth and objectivity, the Weimar government exercised authority over free expression, and the citizens of Germany paid the price. In the words of John Stuart Mill, quote, of course those who want to suppress speech will deny its truth, but they aren't infallible. To refuse the hearing of an opinion because one is sure that it is false is to assume that their certainty is the same thing as absolute certainty, close quote. Of course, the silencing of disagreement or untruth is seemingly justifiable. It's untrue. But in the words of Heda Kovali, quote, once you relinquish your freedom for the sake of understood necessity, you cede your claim to the truth. Slowly, drop by drop, your life begins to ooze away. You have voluntarily condemned yourself to helplessness, close quote. Do not give in to the temptation to abridge the free expression of those you disagree with, because one day, those in power may disagree with you. What of free speech that is offensive? In 1966, Mao Zedong headed the Cultural Revolution to purge the People's Republic of all those that posed a threat to the peasants and workers. In his view, this threat was posed not only by capitalists, but by any who lacked sufficient zeal for the revolution. In the name of protecting the poor and disadvantaged, all those that slightly opposed Mao or even did not support him enough were targeted and subjected to atrocity. The dividing line between objective hatefulness and dogmatic nonconformity is not acknowledged for long by those who are given the power to determine the speech of others. Not only in the hands of the wrong people, but when ceded at all from the hands of the American people, control over the dissemination of information quickly becomes a weapon wielded by those who are in power against those who are not. So our question becomes this, in the words of Alan Dershowitz, quote, not so much whether one supports freedom of speech in the abstract, most Americans do, but whether one is willing to prioritize free speech over other values when they come in conflict, as they often do, close quote. Do not give in to the temptation to restrict speech that is offensive, unacceptable, or even despicable. For one day, in the eyes of those in power, the unacceptable speech may be yours. Although we stand at a critical juncture, this nation is still a nation of liberty. As I stand before you and speak today, so can each and every one of you speak freely your conscience, one to another. This is a God-given right that will yet stand. so long as there remains even one American who is proud of this great country and willing to defend the truths that make it great. Do not give in to the temptation to let this go. Do not esteem lightly that which our fathers fought so dearly to give to us. Let the spirit of liberty burn in each of our hearts, and although earth and hell combine against us, free speech, the only effectual guardian of every other right, will find in us a guardian of its own. Thank you.